So what is lobbying and what is advocacy? Advocacy is educating and raising awareness of the issues. It's our first mission at NDBN is to raise awareness of diaper need across the country. So talking about diaper need is advocating on behalf of the folks who need diapers. It's raising awareness of that this is an issue for people out there. Advocacy does not endorse or oppose specific legislation. So when you start talking about bills, then you're getting into legislation. Lobbying is very specifically regarded to the influencing of legislators to support or oppose a particular issue or piece of legislation. So if you talk to your legislators about the work of your diaper bank and that there is a diaper bank, that's advocating. If you're asking your legislators to provide money in the state budget for your diaper bank, that is lobbying. Sort of a basic, quick and dirty. Advocacy, there are no limits. You, as a 501c3, you are expected to advocate on behalf of your programs, to talk about people, what you're doing, to raise awareness and educate folks about what it is you're doing and why it's important. Lobbying is also allowed. There are some more limits on it, but it is perfectly within your right as a 501c3 to talk to your legislator and lobby on behalf of programs, specific legislation before the Congress or the State House or the State Senate that will benefit your diaper bank and benefit the folks you serve. Partisan political activity, however, is never allowed. So you can't specifically endorse a candidate. You can't even specifically endorse a party, per se. But what you can do is talk about legislation, actual issues or actual bills that are before Congress. But you can't talk about candidates. Well, we'll get into it. There's some gray areas on that, but as far as you can't specifically endorse a person, but you can specifically endorse a piece of legislation. And if you have any questions, just sort of like chime in and say, Allison, I don't understand, so could you clarify? So, not hearing anything, I'm going to go on. These are definitions from the IRS particularly. In general, no organization can qualify for 501c nonprofit status under the IRS code as a public charity if a substantial part of its activities is attempting to influence legislation, lobbying. You can engage in some, but not too much. The problem with this definition is that substantial isn't defined in the code. So we'll get into that a bit more, but basically it's the caution is you can do this, it just can't be a substantial, a large part of your mission. And the other thing to remember about this definition, it refers specifically to legislation. And legislation are acts before Congress, any state legislature, a local council that turns into law. If you're talking about an agency about regulations, that's not lobbying. This refers specifically to information and to legislation that is before a legislative body, a body that makes laws or ordinances, not about regulations, not about interpretations of policy. Specifically, this is about law. Also included in legislation in this case is any ballot referendum that's before the public. So if there's a ballot measure on providing funds for a diaper bank or funds for a diaper distribution program that is open to the public in that case as voters on a budget on a referendum become the lawmakers. So any attempt to sway public opinion regarding to that vote is lobbying. But lobbying doesn't include actions by the executive. So if you talk to the mayor about a policy interpretation for diaper banks, does your diaper bank qualify for a particular ordinance, that is not lobbying. If you are in court and are for some reason, arguing before a judge for a specific ruling regarding your diaper bank, that is not lobbying, and that is perfectly permitted without any limit. Okay, so lobbying refers to legislation. What are the actions required for something to be called lobbying? You have to be trying to influence legislation. So if you just said that there's this bill in front of the State House about, let's say, sales tax on diapers, and that you just say that and nothing more, that's just a state of fact. That's not attempting to influence legislators on voting for or against it. So you have to have not only specific legislation mentioned in the communication, but also a viewpoint and request for action that you want the legislators to support or oppose it. Other things you can do, I mean, you can, in addition to talking about the bills that are out there, you can talk about bills that are out there that are not, and that's not lobbying. You can educate the public and let them know these are bills that are address diaper issues without any kind of value added. It's just educational information. That is not lobbying. Okay? So bottom line, lobbying is communication to a lawmaker that refers to and reflects a specific view on a legislative proposal before the legislative body. It must refer to specific pending or proposed legislation and reflect a view. So if there's no bill currently before the State House regarding sales tax for diapers, but you talk to your state senator and say, we really like to see a bill to eliminate sales tax on diapers, would you support it? That's actually lobbying. But if you just sort of talk about, hey, did you know that diapers there's sales tax on diapers? Or is there, sort of more vaguely talk about diaper need generally in your state with your legislator, and, and there's no bill or no specific proposal, that's not lobbying. Are people getting confused? Okay, I'm going to press on.
Everyone's getting it.
And I'm looking at Susan to tell me when I've gotten weird and confusing. All right, there are two types of lobbying to make things more confusing. Direct lobbying is when you or yourself are talking to the legislator, the lawmaker, the city councilman, referring again to specific legislation, expressing a view. Grassroots lobbying is when you attempt to get other people to talk to their congressmen or their state legislators about specific legislation. And that has to include the specific legislation, reflect your view as an organization or your view as whoever, and have a call to action asking the person you're talking to contact their legislator or write a letter to the governor to sign something or to propose a bill to your councilman. So grassroots lobbying is asking someone else to talk to the legislator. Direct lobbying is when you yourself are talking to the legislator. Why that's important, actually let me go back before I do that. Why that's important is that there are greater limits on grassroots lobbying than there are on direct lobbying. Grassroots lobbying can't be any more than 20% of your allocated lobbying budget. I think that I'm not sure why, but that's the reason. That's the rule. So if you have say, we'll get into this more, but say under a rule where you have, if you take a 501H election and you were allowed, say, $10,000 worth of lobbying effort, no more than $2,000 of that can be grassroots lobbying. But on the other hand, if you choose not to do any grassroots lobbying and just have, the whole $10,000 you yourself talking to the legislature, that's perfectly permitted. Can a diaper bank lobby? Yes. You can't engage in excessive lobbying. And the problem with excessive and substantial is that the IRS hasn't defined these terms. So if you have a very small budget and you dedicate, say, 10% of that, that could, in some eyes, be substantial and cause an audit. Or you have a bunch of volunteers. If you're a volunteer diaper bank, and all of your volunteers engage in a certain amount of lobbying, like a fair amount of lobbying, that could be considered a substantial amount of lobbying as well. The problem is it's not defined. The IRS, and we'll get into a little bit later, provides an out so that you can't have a defined view of what substantial is, because they have this 501H election where it's a formula and set, but you have to sort of actively file that election to get involved in it. But I digress. Let me continue on what you can do. You can't promote or oppose political candidates, and if you do that, you risk losing the tax exemption. You can't use charitable resources for partisan or political activity. You can't campaign on behalf of somebody using the charitable resources you've got. One other thing, too, if you are lobbying, make sure, especially if you're lobbying at the state level, make sure you know what the rules are for registering as a lobbyist in your state. Some states require anyone who even talks to the legislator a sort of minimal amount of time to register as a lobbyist. In all cases, you have to track hours. So if you need any help finding the rules for the state, let me know. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the 501H election. I've mentioned it several times now, and I should have probably brought forward earlier. The 501H election is something that the IRS put together to make life easier for the IRS and for nonprofits. It's a form that you file saying, yes, we engage in lobbying, and we want to have our lobbying efforts evaluated under this election form. There's a formula based on how much you expend for your charitable purpose. And depending on the size of your program, you can spend as much as 20% of your expenses on lobbying. It really benefits smaller organizations, and by smaller I mean anything under $17 million, which I think encompasses all of us on this phone call from now until probably fairly far into the future. And it makes life much easier because all you're tracking really are your expenses, and that includes any labor hours, any travel expenses, but volunteer efforts, apart from costs you might incur in getting the people down to Washington or to the State House, don't get wrapped up against it. It's purely monetary. It's a nice, easily calculated formula that the IRS has in its form. And there are a lot of other benefits to it. The penalties if you exceed the formula are far less than if you exceed the substantial test, which is really it's determined based on some very subjective questions on the 990 form. And even if you don't actually, if you filed a 501H election, even if you don't actually lobby, you keep that election until you say, we don't want the election anymore. With the 501H election, you still have the very nicely defined numbers of how much you can spend in lobbying. Without 501H election, lobbying is limited to insubstantial amount, and it's determined by a bunch of questions on the Form 990 asking, did you talk with legislators, how many hours were spent, and a lot of very subjective kind of questions that someone in the IRS is going to have to evaluate to determine whether you violated it. So they want you to file 501H election. Every nonprofit advisory group, the Nonprofit Associations of America, independent sector, many other groups recommend that nonprofits file a 501H election if you engage in lobbying at all, just because it makes life much, much easier. It's a very simple form. The form 5768, and as you can see, the only thing you're filing, this is the entire form really. It's one page, and it's really just asking who you are, where your address and your ID, and then do you file the election or do you revoke the election? So you file this when you elect, and then when you decide you don't want to use it anymore, you revoke it. But I don't see any reason once you've elected to bother revocation unless you've gotten really, really big and you do a lot of lobbying. So file it. Test is clear, as I mentioned. And it's a lot of money. I mean, under this election, you can spend a lot of money lobbying. If your organization is spending less than $500, if you have a budget of less than $500,000, you can spend as much as, nearly $100,000, 20% of that on lobbying. That's a lot of lobbying. It really is. And the penalties, if you violate this, are it's a fine. If you violate the insubstantial test, if you haven't elected, you could lose your tax-exempt status. They're much harsher on it. And some people have worried that if you file this, that you're going to open up the IRS is going to look at you more and audit more likely. That doesn't happen at all. That really, the government wants you to file this. Okay, so we're going to talk a little about, this is going to be a question and answer, and if anybody knows the answers, go ahead and chime right in. So tell me whether the following are advocacy or lobbying. Posting an article about states where diapers are tax exempt. Advocacy or lobbying?
Advocacy?
Advocacy, yes. Yes, because you're not talking about a specific legislation, you're sort of educating people that these are places where diapers are tax exempt. If people start thinking, hey, why isn't my state tax exempt? That's a whole different thing. I mean, you're raising awareness, you're getting them educated, but you aren't actually asking them to do anything about it. In contrast, if you're posting an article urging supporters to ask state legislators to make diapers tax exempt, this is lobbying, because
have fun.
Because the difference is, one is educating people about the facts. These are places where there are tax-exempt diapers. If you're asking legislators to make a change, to make a law, to include your state in that group, that is lobbying. Talking to state senators about your diaper bank.
Advocacy.
Advocacy, yes. Yes, you were informing your state legislator, senator about your diaper bank, and that's always a good thing generally, and you should know, the people should know that you are out there and exist. Commenting during a rulemaking comment period on a proposed new regulation. Say that the administrator for children and families has a rulemaking on providing diapers through child care programs. And if you made a comment on that, would that be advocacy or lobbying? Expressing an opinion. Anyone? All right, that was kind of a trick question. That's actually advocacy, because the rulemaking comment is an agency administrative function, and it's regulation. So rulemaking. So when we're talking about regulations, when we're talking about policies, it's advocacy. It's not lobbying, because it's not law. It's not legislative law. I should. The lawyers and listeners will probably cringe. there are lots of different types of law. There's judicial law, there's regulatory law, and there's statutory law. What we're talking about, lobbying is about statutory law. When legislation passed by a legislative body becomes law. Regulations are the interpretations of that law. So suggesting an administrator or an agency make a regulatory change is not lobbying. Let's talk a bit about why advocacy is important generally. And again, why we have, as one of our first mission, the first prong of our mission here at NDBN is to raise awareness. You are the local expert on diaper need. You probably, in a lot of cases, are the person who most people you know who know about diaper need have heard about it from. Before we can address diaper need, people need to know about it. And it's important to build supporters for your program, for volunteers, for donors, and it also provides the foundation on which policy can change. Until people know there's an issue, nothing's going to change. People aren't going to give you any money. People aren't going to support or volunteer. People aren't going to even sort of realize that there's an option out there to address diaper need. So we have to let people know about the issue. So go out in the community, and as you are raising diapers, tell people about what you are doing and why you're doing it. Lobbying is important because as much as good work as we've done as a network, and we do incredible work. We are calculating the reports from the numbers from the annual report this year, and we've given out collectively 46 million diapers this year, which is amazing. But it doesn't begin to answer the need, as you all know, within your own communities. And there is a limit to how much, as private enterprises, we can do, as private charitable organizations we can do in addressing it. We need governmental help. As an expert on the ground, you're in the best position to tell government policymakers how diapers affect people and and the agencies you work with, and their ability to serve those people. And lawmakers want to hear from people in their districts about legislation and about what they're doing. You know, what is it? People in the State House or in the Capitol, in Washington, you know, they stay in touch with their districts, but they aren't there on the ground and they aren't doing the work you're doing. And you are the best advocate to sort of explain, I shouldn't use the word, you're the best focal point to sort of explain to folks who can make a policy change why it's important and why it's necessary. So when you're talking to legislators and anyone else really for that matter, try to strike for messages that appeal to both sides of the aisle, because in order to get real policy change, no matter how you feel about the issue, nothing changes unless you appeal to as many legislators as possible and try to keep your message nonpartisan, non-inflammatory. Words that work: opportunity, investment. There's the American dream, basics, foundational. The National Human Services Assembly recently did a big study on frameworking of how we talk about human services, and they have a lot of great helpful hints on how to put together your message to get the so that people, so you can hear, more people will hear it and more people will be responsive to it. So the way of talking about it that resonates with the most people out there, individuals as well as policymakers. Describe the problem in concrete visuals. One of the great things about working in the diaper need issue is that diapers are an incredibly concrete, tangible way of identifying what poverty looks like. People can relate to not having enough diapers. They may themselves have never experienced it, but they can just imagine what it would be like to not have enough diapers. Super concrete. It's a great message and a great story. Don't try to counter myths. Tell your side in positive terms. So if you hear in response, Well, if we give them diapers, people just have more babies. Don't even try to counter it. Don't just say this is what we do. We know that we serve this many babies. We know that we help people get to work, to get to childcare. We know that we are helping families keep their children dry, clean, and healthy, and that we are bringing some comfort and helping them, you know, ease their burdens a bit. Keep the message short and powerful. We can all go on for pages, and I have gone on for pages about diaper need and the importance of addressing it. Keep it short and simple, and keep it short and sweet. And the other thing, it's taken me a long time to realize, more facts don't help. You probably have an arm long of facts of what you can talk about why diapers are important. Pick the most important ones, and adding more. It turns out when they've done studies of this, when you add more and more information, people start tuning it out and start distrusting it more. So figure out the most important facts for your diaper program, and push those. And you can switch them up every once in a while, but just don't have everything you have all at once, because people will start turning it out after a bit. Okay, so given the sort of background of what lobbying and advocacy are, just letting you know what's happening on the legislative side, both in the federal side and the state. And it's been very exciting this year, I have to say. This has been a really exciting year of what potential is out there. The big signature issue right now is the Hygiene Assistance for Families of Infants and Toddlers Act, House Resolution 4055. And what that does, it will create a block grant funding through the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program that would allow states to develop demonstration diaper distribution programs. They're going to be fairly small scale. It's not a lot of money. It's about $75 million per year for 5 years. So it's not enough to cover the state, but it's probably enough to get the state started on developing a diaper distribution program. And we're anticipating that if this passes, that a lot of states will be looking to the diaper banks to help them to set up the diaper distribution program. As, for example, in San Francisco, where Diaper Bank Help a Mother Out is working with the city of San Francisco and getting diapers out to families through the Family Resource Centers. So that's our signature program right now, a signature bill right now on the feds, and we will be meeting on May 12th, May 11th and 12th in Washington to go talk to the Congress and say, hey, pass this bill. We'll see what happens. Other exciting bit of legislative potential, and it technically is not, it's a be lobbying because we're talking about asking Congress to put in a legislative line item. But the President's budget that was released in February includes a $10 million line item to provide diapers and study the use of diapers in reducing maternal depression, postpartum depression. It's in the President's budget, not in the congressional budget proposals, so technically it's not legislation yet, and it may never become legislation, but because it's talking about a very specific legislative proposal, this would indeed be lobbying. Because we're going to ask the Congress, hey, take the President's suggestion and put it into a bill and then pass it so he can sign it. The states have been abuzz, I mean absolutely abuzz with activity about basic needs in diapers. Missouri, there's a line item in the state budget for diaper banks to provide funding to diaper banks in Missouri that is currently on the governor's desk. That means it passed the state House and the state Senate and is, as far as I know, online to be signed. California has a voucher program bill that has gone through its assembly and is now before the state Senate. And that program would provide $50 for children under 2 who were enrolled in the state subsidized child care program for diapers. So it would be $50 a month diaper subsidy for kids in the child care program. There are diaper sales tax bills that are still alive currently in Connecticut, California, Department of, the District of Columbia just put in a sales tax bill, and I forgot to mention too that DC also has a voucher program, and they have a huge omnibus bill before the DC Council that includes sales tax elimination on diapers, tampons, providing diapers and tampons into homeless shelters, and providing a voucher for diapers for kids under 2. So that's a big bill. I don't know how far it's going to get, but it's exciting to see that it's all being put forward. Sales tax bills are also still alive in Illinois and Maryland and in Tennessee. And Utah, the Tennessee and Utah bills are both not only diapers but also adult diapers and feminine hygiene products. Their bills on eliminating sales tax on tampon and other feminine hygiene products in California, Connecticut, DC, Illinois, Michigan, Mississippi, which I'm still not sure. I'm not sure entirely whether it's alive or I think it's in front of committee right now. Missouri, New York, which is one of the states that currently exempt diapers, as is Rhode Island, Ohio, Tennessee, and Utah. And there are also bills to make permanent sales tax holidays on children's clothing that includes diapers in Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, and Ohio. Some of these states actually have a temporary sales tax holiday, and they're trying to make that permanent. So it's very exciting. A lot of activity on diapers and basic needs in the states right now, and some of it may actually pass, which would be very, very exciting. So a fairly simple, straightforward conclusion, raising awareness, first step. You got to talk about what you do, what the issues you are trying to address, and talk to anybody and everybody as much as you can. Reaching policymakers, we're going to help more people by making sure policies are changed so that we can reach more people. We have more resources to reach more people. And, you know, possibly, which would be great, we'd all be put out of business because there wouldn't be need anymore. You know more about diaper needs than anybody else around you, and be sure to share the knowledge. So with that, any questions?
Allison, I have a question and a thought. One is to maybe share with people about the chart that's available online.
Yes, yes, good point, Susan. We keep on the diaper bank resources on our website. There's a state chart of that we track all the state activity going on and where the current, and I update that weekly. Where bills are, what the bill will do, and where it's at in the process. And in addition to the diaper sales tax, tampon sales tax, state holidays, I also have on there, and I'm not sure it's a complete list at this point, but the states that are looking at changing, baby changing tables as well in state policy. So yes, that is a great resource that we update weekly.
Okay, that's weekly update, so people can go even Diaper Need Awareness Week, which is my second question. We had a diaper bank call us. They're in the same city as the first presidential debate, and they're concerned that they're going to be, that's the first day of Diaper Need Awareness Week, and they're concerned that all of their efforts to promote Diaper Need Awareness Week is going to be overshadowed by the debates and the elections. And I'm wondering, how is this something that diaper banks should be turning into opportunities?
Oh, I think certainly. I mean, wouldn't it be great if they started talking about diapers at the presidential, you know, the presidential, is the conference?
The conference is going to be in the same city as the Democratic National Convention.
Okay, yes.
I think it's a few weeks.
Okay, yes.
A couple months before.
Okay, but yes, it's probably unlikely that. Well, yes, definitely don't not promote Diaper Need Awareness Week because you're worried about being overshadowed by something else. And the more you can get people recognizing the Diaper Need Awareness Week, Diaper Need is an issue. Just go ahead and promote Diaper Need Awareness Week as much as possible, and work on your proclamations now. But one of the things, too, to think about with regard to presidential politics and other politics is we've actually had unprecedented amount of awareness of diaper need awareness at the presidential level this year. So it would not, I don't think it would be surprising if we actually did see candidates talk more about diaper need, or at least about the issues that that are tangential to diaper need, child poverty, child early education. Remember, early education you need diapers to really sort of allow kids to go to child care. Early Head Start programs required programs to provide diapers. So these are all good things to sort of push out and messages to remind people that diaper need is an issue that needs to be addressed by whoever the political party is. And if you're not talking about, if you don't say I support candidate X because he promotes Diaper Need Awareness Week, you're fine. Just make sure that you talk about diaper need. And if you are interested in developing a scorecard for your candidates, let me know. That's a slightly more nuanced discussion. You can sort of rate what the candidates' positions are, either based on votes or statements regarding diaper need or other diaper need related issues in your community, and let people know about that. And that's perfectly legitimate within the education element of advocacy. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. We'll follow that first debate, diaper bank, and see what happens.
Yes.
I think mainly just the idea of people using the opportunity to
and
advocate and
also
make it a local issue,
right.
too.
And the other thing I forgot to mention too, I mean, use the power of the Twitter, about Twitter and Facebook. If the debates in your city, tweet the candidates. We hope that candidate X and candidate Y talk about diaper need, or hey, candidates X and Y, did you know that this many kids live in poverty in our city now that you're visiting? That sort of thing is always good. And we can start putting together tweets. Actually, we could put together tweets for the debates. Other questions?
Allison?
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned a site that you said had, and I tried to get it down, but I didn't, that had a great vocabulary for, explaining diapers.
Sure, the National Human Services Assembly has a program, framework for talking about human services, and we can send out the link to that framework on how to talk about the issues that we deal with. So we'll send that out.
Great. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions about advocacy or lobbying, or want to know more about developing report cards, let us know. All right, thanks.
Thank you.